The process that we go through in this course is that you get to peer review one another, and then you'll get another week or two to revise and submit the final submission. So it's an important process in science to give and to receive feedback. It's a bit of a shame that we don't get to see that very often, because most of the journals that we submit to, that our labs submit to, actually don't have an open peer review. So it's something that we're going to talk about today. But I think you need to know what that looks like. I think you deserve to experience this. So we'll do some activities today that would allow you to see some follow-ups and how we responded to a peer review that you did last week or the week before that. I can't remember. But you saw some of the peer reviews that we received, and you might be wondering how to respond to something like that. So I want us to reflect on what peer review looks like, how we engage with others in a respectful, polite way. What is it that we take from peer review, and what is it that we decide not to do? So there's a lot for us to learn from this. All of you will be assigned a Google Doc that looks a little bit like the RRR assessment that you worked on. So try and take all of the knowledge from the RR assessment and implement this also for the peer review. It's basically this template. The template here, it's this peer review template on my website. And it's very similar structure. So, you'll have your headings and the target manuscript, but then it gives you just a lot of things to think about. So basically try to write this as if you're writing a peer review for a journal submission. I'll show you a little bit of my journal submission reviews, how I reviewed other people, and try to do this as nicely as possible. So be polite, be constructive, be supportive, and be as comprehensive and as detailed as possible, so people don't need to guess what it is that you're talking about. So whenever possible, include screenshots. Whenever possible, if you already know what the solution is, don't let them run around and try and find a solution. Tell them the solution is this. Sometimes I even rewrite and rephrase some of the sentences for the others. So there's no reason for you to just like point, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, but you can just say, instead of this, perhaps do that. And then together you kind of work on this. So here again, you have like introduction, hypothesis, power analysis, methods, reproducibility check, just to see everything that runs. So it's very similar to our assessment. I was trying to clean this up a little bit from what we did before in 2 years ago in 2021. Alas, just like you, I'm overwhelmed with a lot of things happening with all the courses, and everything is just like end of the semester. So I did the best that I could given the time. It's quite comprehensive. The most important thing is to really give valuable feedback so that the other team can improve. And then I'll ask you to respond to this. Many of the responses that you'll see here are very, very detailed. I don't want you to waste a lot of time on responding, but I do want you to acknowledge what it is that you've done and what it is that you haven't, and explain very briefly what it is, what your thought process was. So if it was a great suggestion, just say, terrific, thank you, implemented. That's good enough. But yeah, make it easy for the team to implement things. And then if there's something that you don't agree with, that's completely okay. Just write, we decided not to implement this because, and a very brief response to this. So we discussed a little bit of the background and the context. So now you'll get to see a little bit more of that. Team Orange, did this Shafir one. Team Red, because it was something that was just like a complete rejection. For Team Red, I have like a special case study. And this case study is one of the most remarkable peer reviews that I've seen, that I've had the pleasure of receiving. It's very short, but I wanted you to reflect on this. Team Red, if you finish this like earlier than others, because the others have a little bit longer, you're very welcome to look at Team Green's review. And Team Green has an interesting case study from peer community that I had with a thesis student last year. So Team Red and Team Green have some very positive, constructive, helpful reviews that really helped us catch errors at the last minute before we ran the register report. So an opportunity for you. So this is what I'm asking you to do. So in this case, rather than just seeing the critique on us, you'll get to see the critique and the reply. This is what I want you to consider. So the main question that I want to ask you is, should this peer review be open or not? Should it be closed, behind closed doors? Should be open? Everybody should be able to see this. Why yes, and why no? I think you all know my opinion, so I'm very much in favor of open peer review, but my opinion here does not matter. It's up to you and what you think is right for you and for science. So for example, some people say that it should be closed because, or unidentified because some people need to be protected so that there's no backlash, especially for early career researchers. They're very worried that if they go against big scholars, then the big scholars won't promote them, won't hire them, and stuff like that. So I have my own perspective. I've made my own decisions, but I am interested in your perspectives. But I do want you to take your own perspective and examine this through the lens of this specific peer review. And we have some examples for hostile stuff, and we have some examples for highly constructive, positive stuff. So we'll get a little bit of a mix of these two. So I want you to, after you've read everything, to give me an overall evaluation of should this peer review be open, if yes or no, and should this peer review be identifiable so that you'll be able to see who the reviewer is, yes or no. For the critique, I'm asking you what is good about this critique, and all of these critiques, even if they're hostile, have something good about them. So try and fish that out. But I also am asking you what could be improved about this critique. What would you have done differently if you would give this? How would you improve this? And also, since you're seeing our reply, what is good about this reply? What could be improved? What is not so great? I'm not looking for compliments and telling, okay, this is great. I'm really open for critique, for giving us some feedback. When I was preparing this, already a year, 2 years afterwards, when I read my stuff, I cringe a little bit because sometimes we reacted to aggressive comments with a little bit more aggression. So you can see kind of like the slippery slope of what happens in peer review. So be critical. Be honest. What could be improved about this? How would you do things differently if you had the chance? But we have half an hour for this, so try and plan accordingly, like 10 minutes, 10 minutes, and 10 minutes. Try to kind of break this apart. Try to collaborate as much as possible. To talk to your teammates about what it is that you're reading, exchange some ideas, and then we'll have like an open discussion afterwards. If we need more time, we'll do more time. Thanks. Yeah, I had a little bit of a discussion with some of you. Interesting stuff. You know, different experiences with different groups. I'll just go around and I'll ask you to kind of tell the story of what your understanding is based on the very limited scope of what it is that you saw. What's your understanding of what's going on? What's your understanding of the review? Some thoughts, and then I'll give you, like last week, I'll give you some context in order to try and say some things. And I do want you to try and focus on, so what's your takeaway from this? Because everything in science relies on peer review. We talk about this black box all the time, but we don't really know what happens underneath, and all the things that can go wrong and all the mess that's in there. So I think the word that came up a few times is like, oh my God, this is so messy. Like, what's happening here? So many things going on. Yeah, but this is science, and I think we need to acknowledge this. This is kind of the stuff that you don't get to see in methodology and research design class. So I think we'll start with you guys, Red, right? Yeah, okay, so we'll go to Red. I think a very interesting case study. Can you share a little bit with everybody what was going on?
Cool. So we believe the reviewer had a comment. He or she was wondering whether the order of the charity presented to the participant would skew the results. And so,
yeah, so there were a few scenarios there. They were in random order, and she was worried that somehow something would leak. one presented first would affect the one presented after.
So she went out of her way to collect 399 prophilic participants and did her own analysis and end up proving that there's only very marginally significant p-value, and the result is probably not going to change or skew the direction of the effects, and that's the conclusion. And I think that's very impressive that a reviewer actually go out of her way and to check her own assumptions and be very open-minded and change her view based on the results and evidence.
What's your takeaway regarding peer review as you saw it last week and now this week?
Everyone should be like that. Everyone
like that.
Well, I mean, at least the mindset is really, I mean, we really appreciate that kind of open science mindset. She actually say that she has certain hypothesis at the beginning, and then she actually admit that, statistically it's not supported or not quite supported.
Right.
So I think it's really brave for her to share her thought process. It really is a really excellent review response, because it's like she's trying to open up the floor for discussion instead of just judge whether this is correct, this is not correct. I think it's really perfect attitude for practicing as a scientist. So that's really, really impressive, I guess.
Yes.
And also, this is only possible if the scientists, researchers, they upload everything they have, data materials.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's not possible for our reviewers to go through the data, go through their data collection process, and maybe replicate it themselves.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, so very interesting case study. I'll just show you very briefly what took place there. So this is actually Mannix 2 weeks ago presented his thesis here at the department at Brown Bag. And based on this, the other class that I'm giving, 3052 Advanced Social Psychology, is doing stuff to compare all kinds of charities. And in this design, actually, we had seven different hypotheses, 5 replication, 2 extension, and we randomized the order. And she wrote in the first round of the review that she's very concerned that one scenario is going to affect the other. What's going to happen with this? I was not worried about this because I ran this design many times. Christy is now working on what I ended up doing with all the students at Advanced Social Psychology. So instead of doing 7, we ran 104. So each group did something between 10 and 20, and I spent a lot of time combining, cleaning things up, and then we ran all of these together. So even with 104, you can see it doesn't affect one another. There are no order effects. It's just like people answer well, even if there's a connection between those. So I was not worried about this too much. And I replied with a conceptual argument, because this is a registered report stage 1. So there's no data collected still. The only thing that I said is that if we don't find support for the hypothesis, then I will supplement this with additional analysis of order effect as a moderator, or looking at the first instance. So for whatever scenario, the one that's presented first. But she was still worried about this. And this is what she did. So in her reply to our reply, this is what she wrote. She wrote, finally, to see for myself whether a charity order might impact your results, I collected data. 399 prolific participants. This costs money, and not a little money. It's like serious money. This is almost like half of what it is that we ran at the end. Using 4 of your scenarios out of 7, waste, diversification, nationalism, and then I used your exact stimuli and measures because we shared everything to contrast these 2 charities. And then I found a few marginally significant order effects. And then she writes exactly what the results are, but it didn't meet the criteria of the alpha that she set for herself, and it went in the other direction. So at the end, my takeaway is that in contrast to my initial intuition, there was, if anything, a slight bias towards the left side of the scale rather than the right side of the scale. And while the strength and significance of your finding might be affected by order, the direction is unlikely to change. So there's so many things that I like about this, and I wanted to show you how I posted about this on Twitter. So I share all my frustrations and my great wins for open science on Twitter. So I wrote this basically. It's like, this has never happened to me before. As part of the review for PCIRR stage 1, a reviewer suggested randomizing order of scale. We opted to stick with the original, and in the round 2, she ran this part of the experiment, randomizing order, to test possible impact. So really next level. It really gained some traction, a lot of views, and finally she saw this and she replied to this, because this is the kind of reviewers that we want. So now on her CV, she can post the peer community and register report, and she can also link to this Twitter to show that we really benefited from that. So I like the humility. I like that she tested her intuitions. She really wasn't sure, and then she took out of her own funding, which as a PhD student is very limited. She took out of her own funding to run the data collection and to share this with us. We're still kind of trying to understand how to do this exactly, because it's very unusual that in a stage 1, before we collect the data, before we have in principle acceptance, she already went ahead and collected the data and gave us already an indication that this is going to be successful. We also found that this was successful. And we want to credit her, and we also want her data to appear next to ours. So we're still trying to figure out with Chris Chambers, like, what is the right way to do this. But it's, I think, a big win for open science and open peer review, and just amazing that PhD students would do this kind of thing, taking out of her own funding in order to support us. Really, really unusual. Yeah, so lots of things to gain from that. How did we respond to this? I wrote this to the review, to the recommender, the editor. This is nothing short of remarkable and outstanding. In all our years in academia, we have never seen or heard of a review quite like this. And others we've shared this with agree. If PCIR has any way of awarding something for the reviewer, please award her this. The very least that we can do is to recognize the review and the contribution. So if she uploads all of her data and materials and all of that, which is basically ours, exactly the same as ours, then we would be happy to cite this and say something very positive about this in our review. So very short, but very unusual, and I wanted you to see some of the good stuff in there. Since we're touching on the topic of humility, I also wanted to share with you some of the practices that I've started to implement around the time that I was a postdoc. So I'll go back and I'll just show you a little bit of what happens. So for example, on my website, there's a whole section about the way that I review. We'll come back to this because I have all kinds of preferences, like I emphasize Diamond Open Access and I emphasize community journals. So if you go on this link, you'll see that since 2021, I made a strategic decision to support the community and not to give my time and my resources to the for-profit publishers. But in addition to this, I have a general approach to review. So you can decide in your PhD journey or later when you become academics if you want to endorse any of this. But for example, even when things are supposed to be unidentifiable, even if I am anonymous, I always sign my review. I try to be very careful. I try to offer positive, constructive feedback and so forth. Instead of this, I just wanted to show you that this exists. I want to give you an example for what my reviews look like. So I aspire to be like Amanda. I aspire to be as supportive, as constructive, as helpful as possible. So I want to show you two examples from Peer Community and Register Report, which I really love. You know, it's my preferred platform. This is what we've been submitting to the most. So I'll just show you the beginning. This is what my reviews look like. And I urge you, in this course, you don't have any choice because we identify you as a team. But generally, if you review for journals, I encourage you to do it this way. So I always start with, I sign my name as a support reviewer transparency. So this is my name. And then I write, thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to take part, especially because it's a registry report. Please do more registry reports and all that. Also, a lot of journals say things like, I now own your peer review because you submitted this through my journal. I completely reject this. So I write in my reviews that editors and authors are welcome to use my review as they please, post this publicly, do whatever. I don't want any copyright. This is science. Everybody needs to know what it is that I do. And then I open with some disclosures. So this is even before I start my review. So I write, and this is from a while ago, so two years ago, I consider myself an early career researcher with limited experience in meta science. I'm trying to do more of these projects. Therefore, I recognize the complexity. Yet it's very possible that I'm overlooking some factors. So I acknowledge that there are some things that I don't know. I think it's very important for both the editor, the reviewers, and the academic and public academic audiences and the public audiences to know who I am and to know what my limitations are. So I would not pretend to be an expert in meta science if I have not done meta science before. So 2 years ago, I've had close to zero experience with meta science. Now I have a little bit more, so I will write different things. I invite them to look at my reviewer code on my website. And this is very important because I've seen editors use some of my comments in order to reject manuscripts, especially with register reports. There's absolutely no reason to reject a manuscript. Everything can be changed. But I write, my comments are not meant as a criteria for rejection, but rather as assistance and helping the authors do better. I am to help and support you, not hinder authors. I offer my review as guide for improvement. And if there's something that you don't understand about this, then don't just sit there trying to respond, to something that you disagree with or you don't understand. Just write to me, send me an email. I'll clarify if something is not clear. I'm happy to follow up. And then I leave it up to the editor to decide which things must be the most important to implement. But I typically aim to see potential in any manuscript. And then I also acknowledge that I'm a very busy person with everything, also when I go over your reports. So I don't have the time that I really want. And I think it's very important for the public to understand just how overloaded academics are, which is why it's very important to also include this here to say, I would like to dedicate more time to this, but this came at an extremely hectic time in the middle of the semester with high teaching load. I have a very limited time. I hope that I've helped. But if it's, could be incomplete and all that. And then finally, even just before I even start the review, I write, I would like to start by saying that I would eventually want to see this project proceed to an in-principle acceptance and a stage 2 publication. I think it's important to keep track of this literature and follow up and all that. And since this is a replication of a meta science paper, it just, I support, of course, replications and all that. And then I start with a lot of feedback about what I think should be done and what kind of thing could be improved. So I have a section about improving your manuscript. This is how I suggest you improve. I, of course, pitch my own templates, but I make it clear that I don't force this upon them and they don't have to cite me. They can use this as they want without any pressure. And then I give them, and finally I have some requests. So, for example, because they're doing a replication and some of the authors are the same authors that they're doing a replication of, I have some things that I ask for. So, for example, I asked them to take this opportunity to share your code and reproducible outputs, not just for this replication, but also for what you did in 2017. So I use my power as a reviewer in order to try and promote as much as possible open science practices, especially when it comes in peer community and register report, and we have an editor that supports open science, I can do this more. But even when the journal does not support open science, I still try to do this, and then the editor can decide if they want to do this or not. Now, I want to share with you a case study. This is a real case study. And when I did this, actually, my hands were shaking. I wasn't really sure that I should do this. And everybody that I asked whether I should do this or not told me, don't mess around with these journals and these editors. You're a postdoc. Stay away from this. You're on the job market. Don't do this. But I'll share this case study with you. And I just want to tell you the whole point of this. So both with the PhD student that collected data and used her funding, and also the way that I do my reviews, is I want to show you that being a peer reviewer, and especially being a good peer reviewer, has a lot of power. You have the power to change things. So this is a real case study that happened. There's a pro initiative, so a peer review openness initiative. I hope I have the link here somewhere. It came out in 2018, but it started a little bit earlier than that, in 2016, where they were trying to get reviewers to use their power in order to say, I will not review this manuscript unless you provide me with all the materials, the data, and the code. If you want me to waste my time on you, I'm not going to use a trust system. I want to be able to validate everything. So this is the main paper. Reviewers of journal submissions wield considerable power to promote methodological reform and thereby contribute to the advancement of more robust psychological literature. Now, some of these people, like Stefan Lindsay, who was the editor of Psychological Science, Roger was the editor of Journal of Experimental Social Psychology. So some of these people are very prominent. So of course it's easy for them to say, I will not review this unless you give me the data. But if I'm an early career researcher, this is a bit more of a problem for me. But I decided that in my reviewing section on my website, I will add this statement. I support the peer reviewers openness initiative. I will only review submissions with shared data and code. If authors have a good justified reason for not sharing the data and the code, that's okay. I would just rather invest my time in those that can share theirs. And I was trying to stick by it, but I never had like a case study where I really needed to test this. But then in 2017, so this is my last year as a postdoc, I'm on the job market, and I still don't have a job. I think it was around the same time that I was visiting HKUST and HKU to give a meta-analysis workshop. And this is the invitation that I got. And actually this editor, I know this editor indirectly. So here's a manuscript, something about free will, and I did my thesis, my PhD thesis about free will. So I'm writing on behalf of this editor, Eva, would like your assistance in reviewing this manuscript. So already I saw that this manuscript doesn't have data and code, and I was very conflicted. Should I do something about this or not? I was asking others, what should I do in this? I know Eva. I don't want to kind of like have like any negative feelings there. But then I decided to do the review. And in the review, I wrote that I support the pro initiative, and I went out of my way to review this regardless of them not having data and code. But I still asked the editor that if they get a revise and resubmit, that they make this conditional on the authors sharing the data in the code. So the editor, in the editorial decision, she gave them a revise and resubmit. And then she wrote, as Gilad suggested, I think you should provide information on how your sample size was determined. The reviewer also asked you to provide the reader with more methodological information. It's not exactly what I had in mind, but this is kind of like what I wrote in my review. I really just have one general request for the authors and the editor. I was initially going to write the editor about this request upon receiving this manuscript. I try and support the initiative, but I decided not to do this in this review. I have a standard request that I make in order for you to share everything. And then I just like pasted out everything that I have on my website. And then giving the pro initiative, I urge you to share your data sets and code. I explain clearly why it's not possible. I understand how some people might be hesitant, but this is a good thing. And then I saw that, I got another invitation to review the second round. And in that review, I also saw that they still haven't shared everything. And this was a big dilemma for me. Was really hesitating what to do. By then, I already knew that I'm coming to HKU, so I was a little bit less scared than in the first time. And this is finally what I wrote to the editor when she invited me to review this. My understanding from their reply is that they did not address my request, and their statement that materials can be provided on request is not acceptable and does not meet the pro-initiative guidelines. As the editor in charge, I would like your help with the following. Before I review the manuscript, I'm requesting that the authors share with me the data set and all that. And then the editor replied, like I spared you all the before and the after, that this is not an acceptable way to request this because the journal policy does not mandate them to share everything. So I also was able to deduce who the authors really are from one of the emails that she sent. And then I decided to just email them directly and tell them, I am the reviewer. This is what I requested. You did not meet this. I'm not going to review this unless you share. Please share this. So told them I was happy to have a chance to be a reviewer in the first round. However, I soon realized they chose not to meet the pro-initiative guidelines that I requested. Therefore, I only realized your email was included in the decision letter. Therefore, I want to tell you that I need this. So, yeah, this is what she replied to me at the end. Thank you very much. We can't do this because European Journal of Social Psychology doesn't have this. We hope very much that you will find this acceptable, but of course we will understand and respect your decision if you conclude that your commitment to the pro-initiative precludes you from doing so. And then this is what I wrote. It was very difficult for me to write. I would therefore ask to withdraw as a reviewer. Although I reviewed this in the first round, I also wish to withdraw any support that I have for publishing this manuscript and do not wish to be associated with this manuscript or its review process in any way. This is very, very aggressive. I really hesitated with this, but I felt like I was ignored. And even though I'm talking about early career researcher power, I felt like I had some power, and that power was completely overlooked and taken away from me. And then I said, I see this request as very basic and important, overshadows any other positives. If you don't give me your data in the code, how can I know that what I'm reviewing has any merit? I hope you understand. To my great surprise, a month later, so I withdrew, didn't hear about this anymore. A month later comes out a new editorial in the same journal. Openness about research transparency. Last, but certainly not least, we want the core principle of openness to be more explicitly reflected in our scholarly work. This means that we're explicitly asking authors to stick to the openness principle when submitting to the journal, European Journal of Social Psychology. So it turns out that I was not the first early career researcher or the last to say that I'm not willing to review this anymore. So me, together with others in the journal, they could not recruit any early career researchers because all of us refused to review this without the data in the code. Therefore, the editors at European Journal of Social Psychology became so tired of having to respond to us and the emails back and forth and with reviewers withdrawing that they just made this the default. So they mandated having to share data in code as part of submission to European Journal of Social Psychology. So that month, I saw that even though this specific manuscript was not under that policy, I saw that they still were requested and shared everything on the Open Science Framework. They share all the data. I would have liked to see the code as well, but I think that this is a big achievement for authors that twice refused to share everything when I requested them to. So a journal policy has changed from not requiring data to requiring data, not just because of me, but because of many of early career researchers that requested this. And finally, at least one project that I know of that I was involved moved from no data sharing to having data sharing. So this is like my personal story with this. Yeah, so this is the review that I shared with you. Yeah, so this is kind of like what I am for. What Amanda did here is exceptional. I would like to reward people who do stuff like that. All right, so that was Team Red. Sorry for kind of like the branching stories, but I really like this because it's a very constructive and happy story. How about Team Green? Who is green? You're green? Do you want to share what was going on in green?
Yeah, in the part I done,
Mhm.
the reviewer says he reviewed the problems clearly, but also I think there's something strange. For example, the reviewer said he think the part about default effects seems unnecessarily critical, and also the respond also they a little bit strange respond about they are unsure about what seemed critical to you in what reward. I think that's a little bit inappropriately.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the reviewer didn't like something that we wrote, thought that this was very critical.
Yeah.
And then what did we say?
And the response is a little bit aggressive, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We responded aggressively towards the reviewer.
The reviewer was being very constructive. They raised a question or a concern about their experimental design.
Yeah.
And they also provide a potential suggestion to their concerns. And the answers or the responder was also very open to the suggestion and made the adjustment.
Yeah, can you tell us what the adjustment was? What did they comment?
They raised the concern that the design need a more direct or straightforward way to testing the effect, and they provided a suggestion saying that do not to make this too complicated. We just include another sample.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Typically, reviewers just want more things. Add this, add that, do this. But here, they actually helped to simplify things, right?
Yeah.
Saying you're trying too many things at the same time. Maybe just simplify.
Yeah. It's much more clearly.
Yeah. Good. It looks positive to you, this kind of suggestion.
Yeah, it looks very positive.
Okay, great. Thank you.
For my part, the reviewer point out, I think it's very critical issue that the INC bulb, but
light bulb.
The INC light bulbs is no longer used in the EU, so the study design should be revised, up to date.
Right.
So the author responds in a very positive way, and they did a very I think it's very comprehensive investigation into the stuff, and they changed their study design so to make the replication successful and effective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. So looking at this together with last week, what's your overall impression of peer review? A little bit maybe negative, hostile, some stuff a bit more positive, right? Overall, what's your impression?
It could be good or bad.
Could be good or bad, okay.
Very extreme compared to the last week's comments.
Okay.
Last week's comment was really aggressive.
Okay. So this was peer community in register reports. So you can see here, we received the in-principle acceptance. We did a replication of something from 2011 about default effects. And we didn't know much about the context in the US. And what they were trying to do is give a choice between two light bulbs. An ink light bulb with a CFL light bulb. So you need to choose between these two. So we just did a very close replication using their materials exactly. And then what was remarkable about this is that a very small side comment at the end, somebody saying that they live in the EU, but just so you know that, there's in the EU, we're banning both the ink and the CFL. Everybody is moving to LED light bulbs. So I don't know if people in the US are going through the same changes or not. And we didn't even consider whether people have been changing the light bulbs. And it seems like, I didn't know this at the time, that the US, the entire world is shifting away from old light bulbs into something that's more sustainable, environmental, even banning by law the purchase of old light bulbs. because they contain all sorts of materials in them. Now, can you imagine what would happen? So this is a register report stage 1. Can you imagine what would happen if we would just run this and then try to submit this to journals? So just the waste of time and money invested in this, and heartbreak, and this is a thesis and all that. So just to discover this after you've already collected all the data is really heartbreaking. But what was nice about this is that we don't live in the US, so we don't know anything about what's happening in the US. But then a comment like this is like, okay, so we went and looked into things. It was not that easy to find because in the US you have different states and they have different regulations. And then there's the federal regulation, and then the US did something with Obama, and then Trump completely overruled this. But now, Biden is bringing this back again. So it's like a complete mess of what's happening there between the Republicans and the Democrats and between the federal and the state. But overall, it was a very good comment. And finally, we made a change between a choice of ink and CFL to a choice between CFL and lead. So taking out the ink light bulbs altogether. So we wrote, we're so grateful for this. So this is a very important comment, very good catch. We're not based in the US. Thank you very much. We should have checked things more seriously, but we didn't know what to look for. Now that you said this, in order to address this, we changed the entire comparison between the light bulbs. So it just goes to show that even in replications, you need to be very, very careful about what the context is and what you're presenting to participants. And then we added all kinds of checks about what do you know about what's happening with light bulbs? What is it that you prefer? And so forth. And finally, this was a successful replication. So that was a really good, they've helped us with this. Just like you pointed out in terms of the design, we wanted to do a 2 by 3 by 2, status quo versus default versus past behavior. And then the reviewers are like, but this is way too complicated. Like, what are you trying to do? Why are you including all these things? Just simplify this. And we did. So thanks to them, they gave us the excuse to simplify this. Instead of doing this 3-way interaction, we moved this into a 2-way interaction that's a lot easier, is better on power. You don't need as many participants, and just gives a lot better insights. So for these 2 reviewers, we're very, very grateful. Team, are you? You're purple. Okay. Do you want to share a little bit? Same one as the last week, right? Same project. What did you see? What did you witness? Exactly. So we have not, in the first submission, made it sufficiently clear how we're going to address that problem. And the reviewer just raised the need to address that problem and write about it, what are we going to do, and also some suggestions on how to do this, right? Was it provided?
It's just not included.
Okay. Yeah.
That's what I thought it's kind of
Okay. Okay, good. Yeah. And then what's the response? What's your evaluation of the whole thing?
So, yeah, I think the response includes some really common evidence about how it works in different studies. That so sometimes it's consistent between samples or consistent across time. Yeah, so I think it's quite reasonable.
Okay.
But my team may think it could be too long and too kind of overwhelming for the review.
Yeah. So tell us about your debate. What was your debate?
Yeah. Might read what I just wrote.
Yeah. So you were saying that because this is very, very long and has a lot of citations and a lot of links and all that, it might be a bit too much. Yeah.
Yeah. So in my view, only the first and second paragraphs are necessary because they just address the concern of the reviewer directly, and concisely. But the contents following the first 2 paragraphs increase the load of reading, but and without giving the most direct and convincing evidence of the present study.
Yeah.
I mean the present study.
Yeah.
Because how well you did in your prior work or in other work doesn't give direct evidence to what you are doing now, the present study. So my personal view is to recommend the authors to delete them to make the whole reply more concise and focused.
Yeah, very good point.
stage one, so probably you don't have the present study.
Don't have the what?
You don't have like evidence from the present study. It should be stage one.
Yeah, it's a stage one. Yeah.
So if you don't have that, you can only cite the previous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes in order to convince, actually, we're not writing to the reviewer. Whenever you do a peer review, you care about the reviewers, but there's just one person who you need to convince, and that's the editor. So the editor is the one. So it's also not included there. I think maybe it's in a link or something like that in one of the links there, but the editor requested that we provide as much information as possible. So we went into that, but I completely agree with you that sometimes when you add too much information and too many links, sometimes your message gets lost.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit overpowering, and it might be impressive for the editor to see 3 pages of links and citations, but some editors are like, but what's the takeaway? I don't know what you just gave me a bunch of links to open. I don't have a whole day in order to evaluate this. So in this case, with this editor, it went okay, but I agree that this is a risky strategy. But it is an interesting debate. So whenever you give a peer review, a response to peer review, you need to be very careful and keep things concise but convincing. Yeah, so it's a good debate to have. Great, thank you. What was your team in the back? Brown, yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Same project like last week, right?
So I'm responsible for reading
Okay.
And on the major point, it's possible, and I want to raise this again. The reviewer mentioned about the difference between the nominal replication and an operational replication.
Yeah, the classification of a replication, what the replication is meant to do. Yeah.
And it appears the reviewer is trying to separate the pre-registered the study to be registered from the original study. So my standpoint of replying these kind of comments maybe is to we can talk about it. You step back a bit. Right?
Yeah.
Let's just say
Just say what you mean when you say step back. What does that mean?
Yeah. When I think about the issue, I think about for readers, there might not be a very huge difference. To hear a nominal replication, meaning it replicates directly everything, and an operational replication in 2023, right? When you do an operational replication in 2023, and you guarantee it is, you already minimize the difference and improve all the research design, everything. I think readers will be convinced that it's the 2023 version of the original study, and will be convinced by whatever results that come from the study.
Yeah.
I also read your replies to the reviewers. I consequentially understand why in the last lecture the reviewer was pissed off.
Yeah. So last week we saw the reply to this, and they thought they didn't like our tone, right? Yeah. So what did you see in the tone?
I think somehow in the reply, due to this kind of nominal versus operational replication debates, the team threw several questions about the instructions of the research and how to really minimize the difference or how to do better.
Right.
Which at the end, I would think if I were the reviewer, I would be like, oh, so you throw more questions back to me?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that is why she felt pissed.
Yeah, she felt like she's been interrogated.
Yeah.
And there's more expectations from her when she's expecting more from us. She's not the one on the review, we are, right?
And at the end, I think from the first place, step a little back to operational replication in 2023.
Yeah.
And then maybe invite her to throw as much as information as possible.
Yeah.
And then work the whole thing out with a very high level of data quality. That is what I I might do it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, anything else you want to raise?
Just in the middle of our discussion, I mentioned about an appeal system.
Appeal system.
It's very important.
Yeah. I think in this case, we have a very supportive, we actually talked to him. I talked to him when the student decided to withdraw. I talked to him and asked him, what should we do about this? So this is Chris Chambers. And especially now, I think he would be very supportive of publishing this, given all the big story with Francesca Gino and Dana Ariely. Both of them are on this paper. So, yeah, we have this, but I agree that in some cases we need some appeal procedure. How about should it be open, identifiable? Any take on this?
I think if it includes original authors and everyone they should know. Especially if it's just theoretically, if this study is like rejected.
Okay.
Everything is there.
Especially if it's rejected. Yeah.
And perhaps there can be some other US feel like this study is worth something, and they can initiate the doing process again. Yeah, that's why everything should be open.
It's an interesting, generally there's a lot to say about all that you said, but one interesting point is that journals in general don't share rejected manuscripts, right? Once a manuscript has been rejected, it's nowhere to be found on the system. Nobody ever knows that it was rejected from there. The only person who knows are the editor, the reviewers, and the authors, right? So it could be that we need to consider whether even rejected manuscripts should be open. Something about them should be open. Maybe who was involved in this? I don't know, but it's something that we need to debate and think about a little bit more. So already we can see a lot of complexities in the peer review process, perhaps something that you'll come across. Any questions about all of that? No? Went a little bit longer than I expected. I'll come to you, but I think we need a 10-minute break. So we'll do a 10-minute break, come back, and we'll do the other two groups. Yeah, we have 2 more weeks together. And I'm really open to taking this in any direction. Like we've done most of the content. The other stuff I can show you is rather technical or stuff, of course, that I emphasize, but might not be your thing. Anything that comes to mind that you want me to go over, that you expected from a methods class, but that you need more? Good. Is there an aspect of academic life that is still a black box for you, that you have not had a chance to see behind the curtain, that you don't know what's happening there, that you want to know more? That would help you if I would share some of that with you? About your career, your job market, whatever. Do you understand your path?
Applying growth.
Sorry?
Applying growth.
Yeah, from a tremendous record of 0 grants, I am not the right person. I have failed every grant application I have ever submitted. So I'm not the right, do you want me, I can bring an external speaker. Is that important to you?
I'm just curious about the so-called black box about.
Unfortunately, with this black box, I have 0 information because it's the most horrible black box. There's no way of gaining information.
Yeah, also
we don't share in this department. Yeah. We approach one another, but we don't have a complete understanding of everything that was accepted or rejected. So I think generally, the more you do cool stuff, like if you have a sleep lab or like neuroscience, funky scanner things, then likely to do. Open science, bad. Just don't submit anything related to that. But very good grant applications. So maybe I'll try and get somebody to talk to you on that. But I have a feeling there's just not enough information and everything feels very subjective. Like if you apply for grants from HKU or if you apply for grants, I don't know, where do you want to be next? Let's say Europe, it's going to be very different, you know? America, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that actually includes all the researches on how you are going to do analysis. And that is basically like a registration study with promising deliverables. So if you write something in the prompt, submitted for funding, that the same procedure, the very same procedure can be done on the registered credit.
Okay, so actually you gave me an idea. We only have like 2 weeks left, and then I realized that maybe you have things on your mind. Because I remember as a PhD student, I was just like walking around blind. I just had no idea what's happening. And grants is like a really good aspect that actually students know nothing about. To me as a PhD student, I knew nothing about the job market. Like what's happening in the job? How do I get information? Like where do I go? What do I do? So we talk about research methods, but honestly, this is a class for you. We just want you to do better, and you don't have enough opportunities to talk to us, to faculty, and get some information. It's a real shame that we don't share as much as we could. What I can share, given what you've just said, I wish JRF was like that. JRF has a lot of biases, and the way that they assign reviewers is very random. So being able to convince a very wide random audience that this is very valuable depends on all sorts of things. And unfortunately, my own impressions is that it's not based on methodology and empirical stuff, but rather how amazing, novel, groundbreaking, cool it is, applying the best methods. So what I could do is share some of my reviews on my JRFs, and I'll ask maybe Xiaoqi, maybe Dorita will share some of theirs. So I'll try and get a few domains to share that with you. But as for concrete advice on how to do well with grants, it's just I'm not the right person, but I'll try and see if somebody is willing to come and talk about this. Grants, this is great. Thank you for that. Any other aspects, black boxes that you don't know much about, but you feel is important for you in your careers? You have like a different path. Anything that is like a black box to you, you know pretty much what's going on.
How would you suggest going about, let's say you want to use a certain methodology in your study as a student, but no one in your lab has ever done it before, including your supervisor?
Okay.
How would you go about that?
Yeah, can you give me an example, something specific, concrete?
For example, like let's say I want to do a focus group, but no one in my lab has done a focus group before.
Okay.
So like how would you suggest going about that? Like where to, I guess maybe look for more guidance in addition to just the internet. Yeah.
In addition to just the internet. Yeah, it's good. We can maybe talk about this. But I have a preliminary question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you decide that you want to use a certain methodology? Like why, let's say focus groups. Why focus groups? Mm-hmm. Because you think it's what? What's the reason behind it?
It's just because it's like a relatively exploratory study.
Okay.
Very like personal based.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And let's say like the supervisor is like okay with this methodology, but
yeah.
you've just never done it.
But it's something that you've wanted to try. You've heard about this or you've read about this, but you don't know how to do this and you want to learn about how to do this a little bit more. Okay, that's a good question. Let me think about this. How to best... Yeah, I understand.
Other methodologies.
Yeah, I understand. So how to go about looking for something. I'll just very briefly say what I do, and then I'll try and do a more systematic thing to answer this more comprehensively. I found a supportive community on Twitter. Everything that I've learned, including open science, I've learned from Twitter. And when I was in the Netherlands, I was able to find people who gave me foundations to do other things. But that's not a good answer. So this is just me and how I had to do things. Hopefully there's like a better way of doing this, but I'll need to think about that. Yeah, but I think as PhD students, you have to train yourselves a lot all the time based on very little information. How do you know where to go, how to search? How do you know that you've implemented this well? Yeah, it's important for us to talk about this. Let me think about this, how to approach that. Yeah, thanks for that. Anything else? Yes, please.
If you're focused on your path, the industry, how would you get information from, for example, recruitment?
Okay, yeah. Okay, academia versus industry, what's out there, what are the options?
Especially for academia,
yeah.
we have pretty immerse ourselves in that.
Right.
You see how people are cooperating on a daily basis.
Yes.
But for industry, it's sort of like.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. I think in this case, I'm the right person to ask, because most of the faculty will not like this question, and I like this question very much. With some of you, I already said, one of the reasons why I don't have PhD students, just so you understand, it's a personal perspective, I think it's problematic to get PhD students. And the reason for this, not because PhD is horrible, could be a wonderful experience. My PhD, despite everything that I throw out there occasionally, I had a great time at my PhD. I traveled a lot, saw all of Asia. It was terrific. Best time ever, and one of the reasons why I decided to stay in academia. But the chances of getting hired, even in my time, were very, very small to slim. The chances of getting hired now, the competition is absolutely insane. It's just unbelievable what's going out there. And people are talking about like 1 to 12, 1 to 15, depending how restrictive you are, where you want to be, what you want to do. It's easier in this region, very difficult in the US and in the European Union. So things are tough, which is why I feel like bringing PhD students in and telling them that the only path for them is academia is doing real harm. And there's some people who are doing amazing work, much better than anything that I'll ever do in industry, in the field, in both for-profit and charities and NGOs and all that. And we don't hear about them because we're so immersed in our articles and what it is that we're trained on. So I think maybe it would be helpful to know that there's a different path out there. And actually, for many of you, it could be more meaningful, more interesting, and definitely 3 to 10 times more lucrative in terms of salary. Let's talk about industry. Very good question. I like this. We should talk about career paths. Maybe not relevant for everybody, but I'll try and make this like more inclusive. At least give you some information about what's available out there and what happened with some of my friends, colleagues. Yeah, good questions. Anything else on your mind? Yeah. If something comes to mind, contact me, write me a Slack, direct message, email, something, let me know, and I'll try and address this in the last 2 weeks. Actually, I think that's a really important topic, and I think we don't talk about this enough. Work-life balance, identity, separation. Yeah, I need to think a little bit about how to best discuss this. But yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. Okay, so how to kind of balance your own goals with an academic career and with a lot of external pressure on what to do, right? So people telling you this is what you must do. You have your own goals, and then there's career. Just pressure all the time. Yeah, okay, very good. Yeah, let me think about how to address it. Some things you wanted to say?
In addition to that,
yeah, please.
I know there's a work hour limits written on our, I don't want to call it a contract, but like an offer.
Yeah.
The offer.
Right.
Like, do people overwork compared to what the number written on up there?
You're asking or you're saying?
Like work more compared to how many hours that are like written in the offer?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that a normal thing?
Yeah. But, so we need to separate two questions, right? First, do people do this? Second is, should people do this, right? Which one are you asking? Do people do this? Yes. Should people do this? What's your opinion?
That's up to your personal opinion.
Up to the individual, right? Based on their preferences. Let me just ask you, how many of you feel like you're overworking more than what it is that you expected to do in your, I don't know, in your studies? How many of you are overworking? Some of you? A little bit? Yeah, about half of you? Okay, overwork. How many of you feel intense external pressure to work more, to always work more? A lot of pressure? Oh, a lot of pressure. Okay, about half as well. Okay. So we have external pressure, and we have about half that are overworking. How many of you feel a little bit of a misalignment between your personal goals and the goals of your work? Misalignment? I definitely feel misalignment all the time. Yeah. Okay. So we need to address some of that. Yeah. Thank you both for this. You also wanted to say something?
First, the question I want to ask after the activity center.
You want to ask? You want to ask me personally, or want to ask me as faculty?
No, just you.
Oh, just me. Okay.
Process, achievements, got the daily life, maybe wait a couple of years, maybe something will come out.
Yeah. Yeah. If I would be a clinical psychologist, I would reflect this back to you and ask you, but why are you, what are you trying to, what's the one session way to do this, right? Yeah. Okay. But it sounds like you're asking me something else. What are you really asking me? Like, it's an interesting story to hear, like, my personal perspective, but it sounds like there's something more that you're looking for. What is it?
Well, like 1 or 2 lectures ago, I talked about that there's a person who, do the data scanning, and I feel like he is actually a very unhappy researcher.
Okay.
He is very big. He has great achievements in usually psychology. I thought there his name Gino.
Okay.
Yeah. But at the end, he's not happy. So he kind of make up lots of things.
Yeah.
Make up the data, and he does not really feel about research.
The guy on the train.
Yeah.
What kind of train?
The TED talk I was having on the train. Totally.
Oh, Diedrich Stapel. Okay, Diedrich, yeah.
That kind of very, great achievements, but very unhappy.
Mm.
He is not getting anything from research. He is doing it like a robot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is not a good research is fun.
Okay.
So I bring this question back to you. Do you feel like you're happy if you're like that?
Yeah. I'm happy. I'm happy to share. When people come and see me in my office, I try and tell them a little bit about my personal experiences, because I feel like faculty really don't share enough with students. And for me as a PhD student, all I wanted to know is what's happening with people around me, because everybody just seemed absolutely miserable. Like one of the very difficult experiences of doing a PhD in Hong Kong is just how much people were working. There was a guy who was just sleeping in the office. So I've seen people just not do anything. I would try. So I was very protective of my weekends. I would not do like meetings during the weekends. I would go hike, watch movies, travel outside of Hong Kong. I don't know, anything. And I would try to get my classmates to join me. I felt responsible for them. I think maybe some of you don't know this about me, but I had a different career before this. I did not start with an academic career. I was in corporate IT for many years. I was doing IT, software development, project management, and all this. I left all of that just so I can become an academic. I think there's something very difficult about academic life, because we get rejections all the time. We get unbelievable external pressures, and much of the work that we do alone. So that's why when people ask me my own perspective, we can talk about this more in following weeks, but my own perspective is just for you to be an academic is a good goal, but you should have something more than this. There's so many things you can be as an academic. An academic is not just writing papers. It's not just research design. It's not just orange a movie. For me, it's a way to travel the world, see people, engage as much as possible, and hopefully somewhere down the road feel like what I'm doing has meaning and is helping people. But that's me. Everybody's got their own. For some people, it's just like I need to make enough money to support my family. That could be a goal, but just for the sake of this, it could be very repetitive if you don't find something else to give you meaning. So I don't know about Diedrich Stapel. He's just like talks. I don't believe anything that comes out of his mouth, but I do feel when I talk to a lot of scholars is that they're so immersed in the everyday life, it's just they can't balance everything anymore. To find a social circle or hiking or whatever it is that you're into, to help you feel that there's more to life. And I think what's important to understand is that there is a way of doing things better. There is a way of protecting your hours. So in the Netherlands, they really know how to protect their hours. They wouldn't let you go over your hours. In Hong Kong, everybody works here all the time. It's just unbelievable, the workload that people have here.
It's like the US, like my grad school, we have like every semester there's a PA or PhD or graduate student protest.
A protest?
Like every single year.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't get any much done, of course, which is why they have to have like this as like a yearly event.
Yeah.
I just feel like that's like one way, I mean, for people to acknowledge their rights.
Yeah.
As like research graduate students.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Yeah, it's gotten worse over the years. This year alone, like in the UK, some of the things that are happening over there, protests don't work because the people that have all the power are saying it's like, if you protest, we're just not gonna pay you. Yeah, and we give more and more responsibility for our RAs, for our faculty. I have learned the most important skill that you can have as an assistant professor. What is the most important skill? Sorry? Perfect. Well done. To say no. To say no. You have to learn how to say no. Because all the time, people are going to come and demand your time. And you also need to say no, not just to everybody else, but also to yourself. It's like, oh, this project looks amazing. I really want to, I also want to do that one. Somebody's like, wait, you're already doing too much. You just say no. Sometimes you start working with people or you start working on a project. There are sunk costs. It's very difficult to overlook sunk costs and like, I have to finish this project, but you really don't. Sometimes it's okay to just say no. I've learned what I can. I've invested enough time with this, time to move on. So learning how to say no to yourself and to others is the most important thing you can learn as an assistant professor. And unfortunately, our faculty doesn't know how to do this very well. So whenever I sit with them for lunch or coffee, this is like the #1 complaint. There's just too much going on. We can't handle this. Yeah. Good topics. Let me think about what we can do about this, and I'll try and see how I can best support you. I just feel like this environment where I stand in front of you this way is not the best way to go about this. I feel like a situation where we can sit comfortably next to each other in like more round, and you can tell me what you're going through, and then maybe I can tell you a bit about my, and maybe we can do this optional. I don't want you to feel like you have to be here while everybody's talking about this. So maybe we'll just do like the last session. Maybe we'll do this optional. If you want to come, you come. If no. And we're not going to do this here. We'll do this in like a different place where we can sit in a circle and we can talk about things. So I'll make a Slack announcement. You can come or not come. No judgment, no pressure whatsoever. Completely up to you. But we'll try and do this a little bit less structured and more personal. And really try and think what kind of questions you have. What you want to talk about. It could be about job prospects, industry versus academia. Could be about how to maintaining work-life balance. Could be about anything. I'm happy to share my perspective. I have like a million stories. So let's do that in the last session. And for session next week, I'll think about how some of the requests that were here. Yeah, good. Let's wrap up with the two teams. Let's start with you. What did you read? What did you do?
So I think our concerns and reviewers' comments had to do with the stimuli that were being used.
Yeah.
And specifically, it was a set of pictures of children.
Right.
And sort of like the concerns span over like the ethical use of the pictures, the relevance, etc. And some comments being made to a deviation from the article.
Yeah.
Given that these pictures were distorted.
Yeah. So what do you think about the review? What do you think about the reply? What was your impression about this? So it's a continuation of last week. You had the same thing. We discussed some of the background to this. There's lots of sensitivities there. now that you've got a chance to see both the comments and the reply, what's your impressions? What are your impressions?
I think both the review and the reply were very detailed. The reply, like very bullet point targeted each concern that they had, which I think is a good thing.
Right. Okay, so that's a good thing. Anything else?
That the reply can explain more, can be positions.
Okay.
But I also saw that there are some like personal experience. Like the reviewer is that maybe the replication is conducted in COVID during COVID, so that is different.
The context. Yeah. Right.
The reply also kind of like cite some personal experience. Since the original review is very negative, I think the reviewer, when they read the personal experience, will not be convinced by the personal share. Yeah, because they already have bias.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Maybe I should have explained something about this, but okay, that's a good comment. It just seems to go too much into the personal.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And that which might not be convincing to explain some of the things that they were worried about.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
There are really some like articles that investigate the issue and then it cites them. And
right.
Third party opinion.
Right.
To the review.
Yeah, so that's actually a really good comment. So do you think this kind of, let's say that this is a real review. It hasn't been sent yet. It's a draft. Do you think this kind of review should be like open and identified? Do you think the public science has something to gain from seeing this?
You mean the response?
Both, yeah, both.
I think it's because everyone did research during COVID period. Yeah, that's kind of certain few.
Okay. Yeah.
That affect others.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, good. Yeah, so this is ongoing. Like we need to send this reply. Yeah, thank you for that. I'll also see what you wrote in the Google Doc afterwards. Great. Last team, what was going on with your case study?
So the replication fell to support the art theory, and the study supported some other theory.
Right.
And the original author were taking issue with the scenario. It was questioning why, like, time has passed, like 30 years has passed. Why wouldn't you make some adjustment about the scenarios?
Yeah.
And basically, the original author was questioning the whole premise of whether a comprehensive, a workable replication exists or not. And in the response addressed that question, we thought quite adequately in a rather professional manner. However, we're not sure if some of the rhetorical questions provided by the original author should be ignored or not.
Like what? Do say.
For example, there was one part about, where did the confidence come from? And in the response letter, I think you basically provided the confidence coming from our past 54 replication studies.
Yeah.
And we're just not sure if because that question by itself is kind of stupid, whether you should really respond to it or just let it go.
Okay, I see your point. Yeah, interesting. So based on your previous week and this week, what's your take on open peer review, identifiable peer review? What's your take?
For this one, we'll say yes to open peer review because then it can provide public with more sides of opinions on some issue and don't take the finding just for granted.
Yeah.
And we were, however, a little hesitant on whether the reviewers should be identifiable or not. We said it should be optional because political climate and social climate sometimes can be really sensitive. And if some findings are super politically correct, but the reviewers take some issues with, for example, the scientific validity of that study. And we're just afraid if the reviewer will be held back just because they fear the public opinion would target them personally.
Okay, yeah, interesting. All right, good. I think there was another debate here between identifiable, not identifiable, protected, not protected. Good stuff. So I hope you got a glimpse into this black box. It was important for me that you see this as you prepare to do your peer review on the other teams, and as you prepare for your academic lives. Perhaps you'll get invited to be a reviewer, and just understand the complexities, the personal aspects, the good and the bad, and also a little bit of the power that you might hold as a reviewer. Peer review might seem something on the side that we don't care about, but actually it gives you a lot of power in order to change things. And if you understand this black box a little bit better, then you might do better in your career with a lot less pressure, tension, and hostility. So I hope you found this meaningful. I have a bunch of slides about like open peer review, all the different levels of peer review. So you've got open identities and open reports and open participation and open interaction and so forth. I, of course, would like to see open as much as possible. The fact that PhD students don't know what happens in peer review and they need me to come and share my peer review is just unbelievable. For those of you who take part in peer community, one of the great benefits is that everything is open and identifiable. You're very welcome to go on the open peer review in peer community and see what's happening over there. I encourage you also to sign up as reviewers. I think it would be very meaningful for you to go through that process, but completely up to you. But for me, I think really throughout my whole career, I'm completely convinced that everything needs to be open. And identity should be by default identifiable unless somebody wants to protect us. So make everything open by default and allow people to switch to something else if they have justification. And there are some justification where you want to protect people's identities. So that's understandable. So maybe not mandate identifiable reviews, but at least make this default. And as an author, one of the nice things that I have in peer community and registered reports is that I can say that I only want reviewers that are willing to be identified. So I always choose identified because we're doing replications and everything is very sensitive. So that's an option. Time will tell, but for me, I'm a little bit tired of a trust system. I feel like the public needs to know what happens with this magical peer review that happens in the background. So we've protected this for too long. And the reasons why we have predatory journals and we have all these fraud cases and all that is because there's just not enough transparency. If you have any questions about the peer review process, Christy is going to make the announcement soon if she hasn't already. Find me on Slack and we'll talk about things.